great fun is on the air at 877-381-3811.
Tomorrow is the 224th anniversary of the passage of the Constitution out of the Constitutional Convention. Did you know that? So I want to take this call from Dean, Grand Rapids, Michigan, the great WJRW. How are you, Dean?
I am excellent, Mr. Levin. I can't tell you what an honor this is. You are my professor and the only man I would cross the street for to get an autograph from.
Aren't you kind? Thank you, my friend.
My kids, I tell you, we in my house, it's Levin 101. I'm homeschooling all my kids, and I make them listen to the historical parts of your show, and when they're a little bit older, they're going to read your book, Liberty and Tyranny, because I think that is the defining book, and I really think in 150 years your name is going to be synonymous with Franklin, Madison, and
oh my gosh, let's make sure we send you a signed edition. Don't hang up when you're done.
Oh, thank you.
Anyway, I know you have a question.
I do. I have a huge question because, as I said, I'm homeschooling my kids, and we teach them in-depth history on the Constitution and America's founding. And I've been studying the Founding Fathers in the Federalist Papers. And I listen to a lot of talk radio. I listen to your friend and colleague over on Sirius Satellite, whom I love a lot, and I don't want to mention his name. He goes against Rush, but he's a great guy, and I trust him implicitly.
What, Andrew Wilkow? He's a buddy of mine.
Yeah, I love Andrew. And
doesn't he tell you that I'm his mentor?
He does, and I know he is.
He's a good guy.
This is why I'm trying to have this debate, because I don't want to steer my kids in the wrong direction, so I went right to the professor. He uses Federalist 27 as sort of an overview to kind of slant Hamilton as kind of a big statist guy, and he kind of makes the claim that Hamilton lost those debates. But I'm kind of confused because in my studies of the Federalist Papers, Madison and Hamilton were working together, in fact, writing together on a few of them to convince the state of New York to ratify the Constitution. And Federalist 17, Hamilton actually does state that the small, citizen-to-citizen sales and small ventures of government should be left to the states. So I'm trying to kind of get a solid footing on what Hamilton is, because I know in some ways he was a genius financially, and he was George Washington's friend and confidant. So I kind of before I
all right, let me handle this as best I can in the few minutes we have. First of all, Hamilton was a patriot. He really was, and he saw combat. And you're right, he impressed Washington. Washington made him a confidant. But by the way, he also served in the Articles of Confederation Congress. So he was involved in virtually every aspect of the nation's founding. Now that said, when they met at the Constitutional Convention, he was one of the 3 delegates from New York. And he made a proposal for a fairly centralized and powerful national government. And his proposal really wasn't taken that seriously, to be perfectly honest with you. Now, after the Constitution was adopted at the Constitutional Convention, he became extremely important in helping to persuade some of the states in these debates. As you know, he's one of the 3 authors of the various essays in the Federalist Papers, him, John Jay, and James Madison. And he became very important to Madison in that respect, too. And so there are really different aspects to his life, different aspects to his personality, and he argued very strongly and effectively in the Federalist Papers for the adoption of this Constitution. The biggest problem they had in adopting the Constitution was the concern about would the states remain sovereign, or was there way too much power being given to the central government? And what Jay and Madison and Hamilton, particularly the latter 2, were trying to do is persuade the anti-Federalists, who were really the Federalists, but to persuade the anti-Federalists that they didn't have a lot to worry about. But, George Mason and several others said, no, we do have a lot to worry about. And then what happened was it looked like they might lose some of the states in the ratification process, including Massachusetts. The Constitution was almost defeated in Massachusetts. John Adams had to twist arms and use every persuasive power and political instinct he had to get it passed. His cousin Sam Adams was against it and was fighting it. And it became obvious to Madison and Hamilton and Jay and the Federalists that they had to accede to Mason and several of the others on this notion of a Bill of Rights, which at the time was actually 12 amendments, not 10. They didn't call them the Bill of Rights. And they were copied after the Virginia Declaration of Rights, which Madison had authored. And the Virginia Declaration of Rights became the basis for our Bill of Rights, which Madison authored, and which are both based on the writings and philosophy of, in many respects, not completely, but John Locke.
Mm-hmm.
So to make a long story short, Hamilton was absolutely crucial during the founding period. On the other hand, he was one of the more statist-related founders, if we want to call him a statist. But let me tell you something. I do not believe for a second that any of the founders, including Hamilton, would accept, let alone embrace, what's going on in the country today. I believe every single one of them, including Hamilton, would reject it. Have I answered your question?
Yes, I agree. And like I said, in Federalist 17, he kind of does say that the smaller things, items from day to day, from citizen to citizen, should be handled by the local authorities. And I just, because Federalist 27, I just think Andrew's kind of got it. He's kind of using it as a thing to claim Hamilton was a statist, but I don't think he's reading it right. Hamilton was more.
I do not like using this word statist to define the founding fathers.
I don't
because
either. He was a patriot and a warrior and
yes.
actually sought service, and I don't see any statist from today even willing to do that. So
now let me just say this: since I reintroduced this word to the body politic and liberty and tyranny, let me explain what I think statist means. And you can go back to Aristotle and probably before. Where these words were used, they were used by Reagan in his early speeches before he was running for president or governor. What I mean by statist is the adoption of this progressive, socialist, Marxist mentality, which treats the individual as a statistic, treats the individual as really meaningless, and imposes this sort of super powerful government on top of the individual. Now, we can call it socialism, Marxism, fascism, whatever it is. It has different levels of tyranny, and there's no question about that. So I use this word statist to try and just generally define them, because when I was writing Liberty and Tyranny, it's not a book on communism or fascism or this, that, or the other. It's a book on liberty versus tyranny. So there is no way that I would call Hamilton a statist, because he fought in the American Revolution. He rejected the idea of a king, of a centralized government of that sort. And while he favored a more consolidated centralized government than virtually all of the other framers at the Constitutional Convention, but there were others too, he would never have favored the kind of massive administrative state, I don't believe, or consolidation of three branches of government that we see today. So I think calling him a statist is a mistake. Calling him one of the founders who favored a more centralized, concentrated government that I think was worthy of our founding, that's probably accurate. But I don't trash him. I mean, this was an argument at the time, so I think he would completely reject what's going on today.
I agree. And just to be clear, the Federalist Papers, he wasn't in an argument with Madison and Jay. They were united in
exactly.
trying to convince him. Okay.
But you have to understand, a lot of people from a particular school of thought, I'm thinking of Ron Paul and some of his senior supporters, not all of his backers, they don't like James Madison either.
Right.
They don't like any of the Federalists. But I step back from this. Forget about Ron Paul and these others. If you read the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers, it's absolutely fascinating. And I have to say, in some respects, the authors of the Anti-Federalist Papers, you take a look at Yates from New York, among others, they were correct about some of the things that would happen to the Constitution and so forth. But, Benjamin Franklin said it at the end of the Constitutional Convention. I'm paraphrasing. And he was too sick to stand up and give a speech himself. So he had his fellow Pennsylvania delegate give it for him. He wrote it out, James Wilson, who they also hate. And Franklin basically said, look, If the people don't, and I'm paraphrasing, if the people don't want liberty, they're not going to have liberty.
Right.
If the people want to live under tyranny, they're going to live under tyranny. We're giving them, in essence, a guidance. We're giving them a national law that is intended to protect them. I'm embellishing this, but this is the point he made. So this is the point I make too. If we, the people, want to live in tyranny, we're going to live in tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to be drones, we're going to be drones. If we want to be dependent, we're going to be dependent. And that's the big question today. Are there enough of us who say no to this, even though they've tried to buy us off with different entitlement programs and public schools and public this and public transportation and public that? Have they bought off enough of us where we're going to wind up surrendering our liberty, or are we in a position to reestablish a limited constitutional government? That's the battle of the day. That's the battle forever.
Amen.
All right, Dean, don't hang up, my brother. I want to send you a copy. Mike Modesto, California, the great KSFO. Go.
Mr. Levin, it's such an honor to speak to you, sir.
Well, thank you, my friend.
The guy, the previous caller, he's kind of a constitutional scholar himself. Nothing like you, of course, oh great one, but
he was very good.